The movie opens with showing a man named Ciro strolling through a neighborhood in Buenos Aires, Argentina. Ciro is a criminal, and when he spots a car that catches his eye, he breaks into it. He enters the vehicle and quickly steals the stereo. In the overhead compartment, he finds a pair of Ray-Ban sunglasses and decides to keep them. Still unsatisfied, Ciro forcefully expels a fart to further abuse the car. Feeling accomplished, he tries to leave, but to his surprise, the door won't open. He tries the other 3 doors, but none of them open either. With no other option, he moves to the back seat and attempts to open the trunk. When this fails, he starts to panic and desperately tries to break the car window, but with no luck. Determined, Ciro dismantles the inner part of the door and reaches inside to unlock it, but only ends up injuring his hand badly. Despite the bleeding, the door remains firmly shut. Running out of options, Ciro pulls out his gun and fires at the front window, but the bullets bounce back and hit him in the thighs. Screaming in pain and bleeding profusely, Ciro takes off his shirt and wraps it around his wounds, trying to stop the bleeding. Up until now, Ciro had been trying to avoid being seen, but after accidentally shooting himself, he desperately tries to attract attention from outside to get out of the car, even if it means getting arrested. Fortunately, a woman appears after a while and starts fixing her makeup using the car window. Ciro attempts to ask her for help, but it seems she can't see him inside. He yells, but the woman leaves without reacting. In a last attempt, Ciro tries to call his wife, but the phone's battery dies before the call can go through. Several hours go by, and Ciro falls asleep. He wakes up the next morning extremely thirsty, with no water left. Out of desperation, he even licks the fog from the window. Later, he takes the car's stereo from his bag and reinstalls it to listen to the radio. His favorite song plays, and for a moment, he loses himself in the music. Interestingly, the song, which is about having sex in a car, mirrors his situation with lyrics about foggy windows, reclining seats, and having fun all night. The situations are a bit different though. The song gives him a burst of motivation, and he starts trying to open the door again. As he repeatedly hits the door with a tool, a phone begins to ring. It's the car's stereo. Ciro answers, and a man introduces himself as Dr. Enrique Ferrari, welcoming him to the car. Enrique explains that he owns the SUV and has been robbed 28 times before, making Ciro the 29th thief to try. Angered by this revelation, Ciro demands to be released, but Enrique tells him to listen. He explains that he calls his car 4x4, which has an alarm system connected to his phone, allowing him to lock all the doors remotely. The car is bulletproof, immobile from the inside due to its adaptive suspension, and soundproof. It also has polarized windows, including the windshield. The only vulnerable part is the gas tank, which holds 120 liters of fuel and is currently full. Enrique warns that the full gas tank is like a potential bomb, and any attempt to tamper with it could result in an explosion. As Ciro listens in disbelief, Enrique continues, revealing he is a 60-year-old widower born in Chielmas. He reminisces about his middle-class childhood, where they never locked their doors. Enrique complains about how life has deteriorated and misses the simplicity of his youth. He asks Ciro what he would do if he caught his own son stealing. Frustrated, Ciro threatens to report Enrique to the police and demands to be released so he can kill Enrique and his family. Before Ciro can finish, Enrique hangs up the phone. Enrique then turns on the air conditioner remotely, setting it to the lowest temperature to torment Ciro. Unable to turn it off, Ciro uses his shirt to cover his wound and tears part of his jeans to wrap around his injured foot. After an hour of freezing torture, Enrique calls again, repeating his question about catching a son stealing and promising water if Ciro answers correctly. Ciro's response doesn't satisfy Enrique, who then recounts a harrowing incident from last December. 2 men broke into his daughter's home while she was parking her car. They held his grandsons at gunpoint for 3 hours, despite her training to avoid eye contact and have money ready to hand over. Ciro, uninterested in Enrique's stories, asks what kind of doctor would deprive a wounded person of water. Enrique praises the question and challenges Ciro to guess his profession before hanging up. As Ciro contemplates, a police car stops in front of the SUV. Filled with hope, Ciro tries to get the officer's attention.
Hey! Hey, maestro!
But the policeman simply issues a ticket and drives away. Several hours later, Enrique calls again and demands Ciro's full name and ID number in exchange for water. Desperate, Ciro provides the information, and Enrique directs him to water in the washer hose in the back. Despite its light blue color, a dehydrated Ciro eagerly drinks it, feeling momentary relief. Still hungry and without food, he contemplates eating an insect that has somehow entered the car. Later, Ciro checks his wound and realizes it is infectious, turning yellow, and he has developed a fever. To give him some respite, Enrique turns on the air conditioner to cool him down and reveals that he is also sick, suffering from terminal cancer with only a year to live. As Enrique continues to talk, Ciro, feeling overwhelmed and exhausted, removes his clothes and passes out, his body also turning yellow. Later, Ciro searches through the car manual, hoping to find a way out, but ends up eating its pages out of sheer desperation and frustration. At his lowest point, he urinates in a container and drinks it to quench his thirst. Suddenly, Ciro sees a glimmer of hope when another burglar attempts to break into the SUV. However, passers-by notice the thief and beat him up before handing him over to the police. As night falls, dehydration and hunger push Ciro into a reflective state. He philosophizes about the disparity between the rich and poor, lamenting how the world is full of impoverished people, governed by laws made by the wealthy for their own benefit. He declares his refusal to obey these laws, revealing that he became a thief, following in the footsteps of his father and grandfather. The next day, Enrique calls again and reads the newspaper to Ciro. In a good mood, Enrique directs him to a hidden chocolate bar behind the brakes. After spending the day resting and watching the neighborhood, Ciro repeatedly strikes one of the doors he stripped down to its metal parts from the inside. Eventually, he manages to create a small hole that opens to the outside and screams for help, but no one hears him. Later, Enrique calls and reveals he has contacted Ciro's family. Hearing this, Ciro tears up and warns Enrique not to harm them. Tearfully, he asks what he did to deserve this. Enrique then pulls out Ciro's criminal record, revealing that Ciro has killed someone before. A tearful Ciro denies it, but Enrique presents evidence, explaining that Ciro broke into the Salerno brothers' home in Barracas to rob them, and when they fought back, he shot them. Enrique also mentions an old bus driver that Ciro badly beat up. However, Ciro refuses to take responsibility, blaming the driver for not letting him rob the passengers, and insists he has already paid for his mistakes. Later, Ciro somehow charges his phone using solar power and attempts to call his wife, but it goes straight to voicemail. In his message, he confesses everything and apologizes for his mistakes. After breaking down in tears, Ciro fiddles with the car's start button and manages to turn it on, discovering that it can be started without a key after pressing it multiple times. He fastens his seatbelt and puts the gear in reverse, but it gets stuck, forcing him to only drive backward. He speeds in reverse and crashes into a pole, hoping to attract attention. The airbag deploys just in time, preventing any injury. Ciro kicks down the weakened rear window and escapes. Despite being in pain, he drags himself to a nearby gas station eatery and helps himself to some food. As he enjoys his delicious burger, the manager demands he pay and leave immediately. Enraged, Ciro shoots the manager. Suddenly, Ciro wakes up and realizes it was all a dream. He is still trapped in the car. Enrique calls again, and Ciro threatens to commit suicide, but Enrique is not surprised. Frustrated, Ciro puts the gun in his mouth and pulls the trigger, but the gun jams. Enrique laughs at his plight and tells him to look in front of the car, finally revealing himself. Enrique gets into the car with Ciro, who is extremely exhausted and unable to escape. Enrique tends to Ciro's wound, but gets distracted by a work call as Ciro appears to fall asleep. Suddenly, Ciro attempts to shoot the doctor but fails, then jumps out of the car. Finally free, he fires a shot in the air to call for help. Enrique catches up to him and tries to drag him back to the SUV. At that moment, a policewoman spots them and orders Enrique to drop the gun. 2 hours later, the area is surrounded by people, media, and police. But Enrique refuses to let Shiro go, claiming he is the real victim. When all else fails, the police call in retired negotiator Julio Amadio. Julio asks Enrique what he wants, and Enrique lists various daily frustrations that the government ignores because no one gets hurt. He complains about dodging 2,000 dog poops on his way to work because dog owners don't clean up after their pets. On the other side, the public sympathizes with Enrique, cheering for him.
¿Cuántos tienen reja? ¿Cuántos alarmas?
Julio continues negotiating with Enrique and eventually convinces him to release Chiro. The police arrest Chiro, and Julio asks Enrique to surrender. Instead, Enrique gets into the SUV, placing a timer on top. Suspecting it's a bomb, Julio orders everyone to back up. The SUV explodes, killing Enrique but sparking a sense of urgency in the hearts of ordinary people to fight with the inequalities in the society.